Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Looks like it's a nice afternoon. That's why we don't have a full house. I was surprised we had a full house this morning at 8:30, which I thought was pretty brutal to start a session at 8:30 in the morning on a Sunday, but it was a full house. My name is Dave Madison. As you can see, I'm a program manager in the Exchange Server Product Unit. Manage the JDP program. There's about 4 people on my team that really take care of the customers. So the fact that I manage it lets you know how much I know. Most of the people know more than I do. But anyway, today we want to talk about some of the lessons we learned with our JDP customers going through the Exchange 2000 program. We had originally titled it Good, Bad, and Ugly, and as we started to go through it, honestly, there wasn't a lot of, well, as we go through the session, you'll hopefully be able to glean what's ugly and what's good and what's bad from the lessons learned. Because if things go well, things really go pretty well as far as deploying your Exchange 2000 server goes. So there's not a lot of ugly. So we'll go over initially what the JDP program is, talk about why move to Exchange 2000, which I think is going to be one of the big hurdles you'll have to cross with your customers in order to get the project started, is basically why should we undertake this. Talk about teamwork and planning and Active Directory design, which I think those 2 bullet points there are the really key to your success. And if that goes bad, things are really ugly. If that goes well, things go pretty good. And then we'll talk about migration methods and third-party issues. How many are familiar with the JDP program, other than knowing it's another 3-letter acronym within Microsoft? How many knows what it actually means? Will? Okay. Right. Joint Development Partner Program, yeah. It really started out as the Exchange 4.0 Early Adopter Program. The JDP program is basically what we thought of as the Early Adopter Program. When you look back at traditionally how we did betas within Microsoft, kind of before 4.0, is basically what we threw some software out to some customers and hoped to get some feedback. Some of us did work closely with our customers in doing a pilot program and gave the feedback kind of, in a way, somewhat randomly to the product group. There wasn't a focused way to gather that information. The product group didn't really work closely with those customers in a lot of ways before. You know, some groups did, some groups didn't. Particularly in the enterprise group, you know, we kind of like, okay, run Windows 2000, run NT, run Windows, and let us know what's going on. Well, with Exchange 4.0, we sat down and we thought, well, let's get some customers that we can really get to deploy this thing before we ship, so we can prove it in the enterprise. So when we ship, we can tell the world, look, we've had customers running this and it's solving their problem. And we got a lot of success with that. And then when Brian Valentine moved over to the Windows 2000 group, he took a lot of the Exchange best practices, one of those being the Early Adopter Program. But the marketing guys got involved and they wanted to rename it, and so we don't really care what it's called. We just want to have a set of customers that we work with. It's primarily a development-focused program. We want customers to work with us closely, help us test scenarios that we can't test, give us feedback, and basically prove the viability. Now, I understand the marketing offshoots that we get from the Exchange, from a JDP program. I understand there are sales advantages to the field in getting their customer into the JDP program. But at the end of the day, from the development team, we really look at, is this customer a good customer to work with? Is this customer somebody we're going to get feedback from and really help us test and deploy and prove the viability of the product? So for 2000, we had about 50 customers in the program. Once we entered it, we added customers throughout. We started out with about 35 customers. And usually when you do that, you say, okay, I want to have a set of maybe 25 or 30 customers that I know I can consistently get feedback from. Well, to do that, you have to bump up your numbers because you're always going to have customers that aren't going to be as aggressive as others. So we had about 50 customers. It started over 2 years ago, which I was surprised when I sat down and thought about this, that it was about this time 2 years ago that we started taking nominations for customers to join the Exchange 2000 program. And a lot of those customers, some of those customers that we put in the program had been with us since 4.0, so they understood the benefits of it as well. And we knew they were really good to work with. Wide range of customers. We had customers as small as 200 users and customers as large as 400,000, that being Siemens. And a wide range of businesses. We thought we'd go out and get a lot of, have the business coverage as well as the size. So that worked pretty well. So some of the highlights, we shot for 50,000 seats by RTM from our JDPs alone. Well, we hit 134,000 seats deployed, which we thought that was pretty good. We had 15 customers with greater than 1,000 seats deployed in their environment, which we believe was pretty good too, and then 5 customers completely deployed. Now, granted, some of those are fairly small deployments, but the fact that they were able to get it completely deployed we think is great. MTB, for one, about 900 users, they're using all the features of Exchange 2000, clustering, OA, conferencing, instant messaging. Iscor, a mining company down in South Africa, migrated from non-Exchange systems to Exchange 2000, 11,000 seats. That went really well because, as you'll see, they were migrating from non-Exchange 5.5 systems. Oregon State University has been with us since the beginning. They're up to about 4,000 users. And HFK, that one at the bottom, is a school district in Norway that has 25,000 of their students configured for the school district, basically using OA and MAPI to get access to mail. Now, if you add in the JDPs and our Microsoft deployment, we had close to 200,000 seats running on Exchange 2000 at RTM, which you think was pretty impressive. Here's just a highlight of our top 10 customers, so to speak. Jefferson County School District in Kentucky, 65,000 users configured across their servers. That's not all 65,000 logged in at the same time. But they wanted to get this up and running before the school system started. Most of their users, all the way from kindergarten all the way to high school, logging in via OA to get access to mail and a lot of services. Very impressive. They went and basically did this on their own, and we went out and discovered them. We said, hey, wow, here's a customer that's doing this all on their own, and it's actually working. And they didn't run into a lot of issues, which we thought was very impressive because we had to do a lot of hand-holding initially with our JDP customers to get them successful. And yeah.
How many servers do they have?
That's a good question. They're doing a lot of front-end, back-end servers. I'm not sure how many front-end servers they have. I think they have about 11 or 12 back-end servers. I'm not sure how many front-end servers they have for sure. As you can see here, a lot of the highlights of these customers, a lot of the features they're taking advantage of. OA is obviously very impressive. Now a lot of people discount OA. That's no big deal. But as you'll see, OA is a good selling point, I think, to get Exchange 2000 off the ground at your companies. Clustering was a very good feature that customers used and took advantage of. And we didn't have a lot of clustering issues. There were a couple issues that we saw, but once customers got it up and running, it worked fairly well. ANZ Banking, a highly distributed deployment. They have small branch offices throughout Australia using OA, using MAPI. And then Payne Weber, which for the New York district is a very high-profile customer because the financial industry, you get one financial company deciding on a technology, the other ones tend to follow. So, and they've just recently got up to 1,300 users. So the big question that we struggle with our JDPs to even get them in the program, and I think this is what I see when we talk to the field is, why in the world do I want to do this in the first place, right? If you think about it, unfortunately, the marketing guys are going to kill me for saying this, but Exchange 2000 doesn't really solve an end user problem when you think about it, right? There's not a lot of, everybody here, discounting the pain that we went through to get Exchange 2000 up and running at Microsoft. If Microsoft didn't send out the mail, if ITG didn't send out the mail to you saying tomorrow you're moving to Exchange 2000 and your mailbox is going to be Exchange 2000, you probably wouldn't have known, other than, okay, the stability issues. But other than that, from a pure feature set, right, from this is what I was today versus this is what I can do today, was there really anything that you noticed differently from an end user perspective? Will? Well, okay. But yeah. Right. This is not a quiz, by the way. So, if I had prizes, I'd give them out. Hey, that's good. Okay. But your typical user in a corporate environment, you say, okay, what am I getting? Outlook still looks the same to me, right? Now we'll go over some of the features, some of the issues, but it's kind of hard initially to say, look, I've spent the last 3-4 years getting Exchange deployed and up and running. For the most part, it's running pretty well. I've figured everything out. I've worked through my issues. I got fairly reliable uptime. I know how to solve the issues when the servers go down. Why do I want to go through this pain again? So it's a tough thing. Now for the admins, you can go through a litany of features, right? Multiple databases, more scalable databases, storage groups. I can manage my data a lot better. Active-active clustering, which is great, right? We had active-passive in 5.5, and that didn't really solve anybody's problem. That's not what they wanted. So active-active clustering, the new transport, link state routing, those kinds of things, SMTP based. Active directory integration, that's a debatable, right? It's okay, is that a good thing? I know it's painful, but when you look at it from a pure administrative perspective, it is a good thing, right? You have this one place to go do your administration. You don't have two separate directories to manage. The new admin architecture, I can break out my servers and manage my servers from an administrative perspective and configure them from a routing perspective. All good stuff for the admins, right? Now for the end users, there are fewer reasons. Obviously OA is a great feature, right? A lot better, a lot more performant, a lot more flexible, and as you can see from our list, a lot of customers took advantage of that. One of the things that we don't mention a lot, and that customers probably don't realize until they do it, and we can see this as ITG is now going to give us 100 megabytes worth of data to store. Content indexing is going to make searching my mailbox a lot faster. So that's a cool feature too. Kind of hard to demo, to the end user, but that is a cool feature. But really, at the end of the day, you have to convince the person that's signing the check that we have to do this, right? The IT guys are going to be all over it. Hey, this is really cool. We should do it. It's new technology. I'm a bit head. I want to do this. So for the business person, some of the major reasons are not really the core Exchange stuff, but a lot of the other features we put in, particularly conferencing and instant messaging. We see that for the business person as really the reasons they want to start driving to this technology. And it's really good to say, okay, we can start deploying conferencing, and you can make the case that we can deploy conferencing without having to do a whole Exchange 2000 deployment, but it's a good sort of beachhead, right, where you can get that going, and then in the background start upgrading your servers to Exchange, start migrating your servers to Exchange 2000. Instant messaging is another one. Once they're convinced of the business value, initially you kind of talk about instant messaging to business decision makers, and they think about their 14-year-old kid at home doing AOL instant messaging, and I don't want my users in the company doing that. But once they see the business value of it, they jump all over it as well. And overall lower TCO from the admin features. And our Exchange JDPs generally jumped on one or two of these features. Aventis, for example, Aventis Pharmaceutical is going really aggressively with conferencing. It's kind of keeping IBM at bay there, but they're able to lower their traveling costs, lower a lot of costs by implementing conferencing. So, like we talked about, the big wins for the JDPs, active-active clustering was a big win. Server consolidation, while they're not doing it out of the, they don't do it initially, eventually everybody's on board to do server consolidation, and we're already seeing it in ITG where they're consolidating down to about 10 or 11 servers in Redmond. I am in conferencing, like I said. The application development story is extremely strong as well, and that's something we didn't really stress from an enterprise infrastructure issue, but our customers jumped on that. We have somebody like Oregon State University who's hosting internally for their students a website, hosting that out of Exchange itself, not from IIS. And they have an application developed such that our students will submit homework into these public folders. A workflow app fires off, routes the homework to the professor, and they have applications that will actually grade the homework of that professor intervention, and then route it to the professor and approve it, and then send it back. Which the cool thing about that is, and one of the goals they wanted to do is it gets the professor out of looking at paper and with their back turned to the class, and gets them more student interaction. We looked at Aventis. We got a report from Aventis the other day where they did some message traffic analysis, and they found that over 50 to 60% of all the messages that were sent within their Exchange organization, including 5.5 and 2000, were application-based messages that they're seeing within their company. So they're seeing applications driving a lot of their message traffic within the company. Migrating from, I have there in quotes, non-Exchange systems works very well. A lot like in 4.0, people throwing away their group-wise systems, the CC mail systems, their note systems. Like I said, a company like ISCOR came from about 3 or 4 mail systems to Exchange 2000, and their migration went very well because they didn't have a lot of these 5.5 decisions that they're going to have to make, as we'll go through in this session today. So the big challenges: waiting for the AD design to solidify, actually waiting for people to decide what the AD is going to look like and what is going to be our AD deployment. We had a few customers that undertook their AD design, and then once they started seeing how Exchange 2000 needs to interact with the AD, they had to go back to the drawing board and make some changes. Even within ITG, we saw some adjustments we had to make with our AD design, whereas, okay, now we have to scope our sites a lot better, where we want to make sure that Exchange servers are in the same site with the DCs and GCs that they need to get access to, those types of things. I think Intel is still struggling with this. They find every reason they can, to figure out, we got to make another decision for our AD before we can get Exchange 2000 deployed. I think it'll be a miracle if they ever get Exchange 2000 deployed there. Same with Credit Suisse. They're doing the same thing. The ones that are really successful are the ones that everybody's on the same page. So that goes to the next point, ensuring the different teams work together and communicate together. And the other thing we found, especially beginning, and you'll probably have this with your customers because we had to do this with our JDPs, particularly new, the ADC can be confusing. How do I set it up? What sort of connection agreements do I need to make? Do I want to do one way or two way? And we'll talk about this. But just understanding what the ADC does and doesn't do is one of the things that you'll spend a lot of time with initially. So we have a lot of documentation that you can give your customers to read and study. And then the last point was getting third-party software to run under Exchange 2000. We found that a struggle that we didn't have antivirus protection. We didn't have backup and restore solutions. We didn't have our NetIQ or BMC solutions. So a lot of customers were kind of waiting for that before they went full bore into production. The one that really kept them from going full bore was no antivirus protection. They could live without the others. They could wait for the others, but antivirus protection really kept them from going forward aggressively. Well, we talk about teamwork. In the old NT Exchange world, things were separate. I had the NT guys doing the network infrastructure, setting up the users, giving them a password, giving them access to resources, and they were pretty much done, right? They monitored the infrastructure. The Exchange team looked after the messaging servers, and for the most part, they owned what was known as the directory within the company, for the most part, right? Because that's what the users saw from Outlook and everything. That was their directory. Well, now with Exchange 2000, Windows 2000, those worlds tend to collide more, right? Who's going to make the directory decisions? Is it the networking guy who's never worked with a directory before or has worked with this directory, SAP directory or something like that? Is it the messaging guys that are going to have a say in that? Strong dependency on Windows 2000, on Active Directory in Exchange 2000. Everything that Exchange 2000 needs, configuration information, routing information, everything is in the Active Directory. The design has to, we have to account for Exchange 2000 when we design our Active Directory. And like I said, who will own all these decisions? The companies that were successful made these decisions early, got everybody on board. And like I said, the companies that are still struggling are a lot of times struggling with these political issues. Tip O'Neill said every decision that we make is a political decision. I think even in IT, every IT decision that we make ultimately, even though it sounds like a technical decision, it's a political decision at the end of the day. So some of the things you need to think about, like I said, the successful ones had a good working relationship between the two teams. They just knew they got on board, and they saw the value. They saw that, okay, Exchange 2000 is going to give us really a business value for deploying the Active Directory. I think for a lot of our customers up until now, the reason they haven't gotten off the mark with their Active Directory deployments is they haven't had a lot of compelling reasons to do it. Exchange 2000 is not out there. I can't take huge advantage of the Active Directory. Now I can with Exchange 2000 out there. Like I said, unsuccessful JDPs have these Chinese walls. I look at Credit Suisse. Again, there's another company that I think it'll be a miracle if they get Exchange 2000 deployed, because they have their Active Directory folks and their Windows 2000 folks over here making decisions without informing the messaging folks, making changes, and actually making it hard for the messaging folks to have the permissions and the rights to the Active Directory to do the actual installs. A lot of change control. I understand that from a company perspective. I understand why companies do that. I mean, it's necessary to do, but I'm just saying, the more you can get those people talking together and singing to the same song, I think the better success you'll have. So some of the questions you need to decide. And really, these are some of the ugly, if you don't make these decisions right, this is what's going to make your deployment or your project ugly, right? You're going to spend a lot of time working through these issues. Once you get those issues resolved and know how to go forward, things will go pretty well. Do you need to reorg your design teams? You know, do you need to reorg IT? I was talking to a consultant the other day, and usually in a project plan, he puts in, there will be a reorg, right? Somewhere in this point, and you account for that in time. And do you need to revisit your support model? I mean, we even see that, we're going to see that in PSS, where the PSS folks are going to have to, the Windows 2000 folks and PSS are going to have to understand what Exchange 2000 does. The Exchange 2000 support folks are going to have to understand more about the Active Directory than they probably ever wanted to. And training is an issue as well. You need to train your frontline folks. A lot of companies expect, you know, this is Microsoft, this is the next release, it's going to work like the previous release, it should just work, I shouldn't need a lot of new training. This is really a new world. You know, a lot of things, there's a lot of moving parts with Exchange 2000 and Windows 2000. So, one of the key things, plan, 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 and plan. Take the README, read it, put it under your pillow at night, you know. Tell your customers to do that. Take all the planning docs you can find, have them read them, you know. Go to as many training sessions as you can, not only for Exchange 2000, but for Windows 2000. I made this joke one time in front of a bunch of consultants and Microsoft folks that, you know, wouldn't it be nice, and I was just joking, I said, wouldn't it be nice if there was a quiz in setup, so when, you know, you launch setup and asked you 10 questions, and if you couldn't get 80% right, you couldn't run setup. And I was just joking, and almost everyone said, yeah, we should do that. That would be cool. You know? But, you know, when you think about it, I mean, when you think about it, a lot of people, they just, oh, it's a new CD, it's an upgrade, I'll pop it in and I'll upgrade. If we do that with Exchange 2000, you're in for a world of hurt. Like I said, this is a migration, not a simple upgrade. As much as our marketing folks hate me saying that, we're migrating from 5.5. Yeah, we can do the upgrade once we get everything built, once we get the infrastructure decided on. The upgrade will work, but you need to approach it like a migration. And again, the ones that were successful approached it that way. The fear I have is the breadth customer out there, like I said, that gets the CD, oh, Exchange 2000, okay, away I go, right? Hasn't thought anything about what the Active Directory is going to look like. And you have to do a lot more planning if you already have 5.5 installed. Unfortunately, it's really painful that we make it, the hardest thing for us to do is to migrate from our own product. It's very easy to migrate from our competitor's product to Exchange 2000. It's very hard, I think, and requires a lot more planning to migrate from our own 5.5 product.
Dave,
Yeah.
are you seeing pushback from the customers on that?
On what?
That 5.5 is harder to go to 2000.
Well, that's an interesting question. The question was, are we seeing pushback from customers that it's harder to go from 5.5 than from other mail systems? Well, you know, a lot of our 5.5 customers have been running on 5.5 for a long time, so they don't, a lot of them forgot how painful it was or what they needed to do to come from their old mail systems. I think they're frustrated. I don't get pushback, but they just say, wow, this is, you know, like I'm talking about. I got to think a lot about this stuff, right? It's not simple. I think they expect it to be simple because we talk about it's the next release, it's an upgrade, right? And the ones that struggle are the ones that don't take the time to really think about what they need to do.
Are they resisting it because of that?
I don't get that sense, really. There is a lot of pent-up demand for Exchange 2000. I think it's going to be eye-opening when they realize what all the moving parts are required, right? So you guys have it's an incumbent upon you guys to make sure they understand that you can't just go do this without having thought it through. And again, I look at our, and my context really in this presentation is just what we've learned from the JDPs. I know there's a few of you out there that are having a lot of pain with your customers. The advantage we had with our JDPs is we were able to hold their hands, right? And they were able to come to us, and we were able to work through a lot of issues in the product that they ran into early. I mean, if our JDPs didn't take the arrows for your customers, right, it would have been a lot worse if we didn't find a lot of the things that we found with our JDP customers. So these are some of the things we'll discuss over the next few slides. Active Directory design, particularly, like I said, those are the two, I mean, I repeat those points because that's critical. You don't get your Active Directory design right, and I'm not necessarily sure what right is, but if you don't understand what you need to do so Exchange 2000 exists well in your Active Directory, things will be ugly. Domain and OU design, I mean, you know, the typical, yeah, question back there. Are there examples of things that went wrong? We'll get into that, some of that, as we go through the session, right? I mean, I'll talk about a lot of that. Like I said, we have the advantage of learning this stuff and getting the feedback from our JDPs so we could make changes to the product so it was a lot easier when we shipped. So I'll go over some of the things that went wrong, some of the things we had to think about that we had to anticipate and make changes to. If we didn't, it would have been really ugly. So some of the things you have to take into account. Which site should be upgraded first? Because that kind of sets the tone for how the rest of your deployment is going to go. Do you want to clean up your org and site model before you start migrating to Exchange 2000? Are there things on the 5.5 side that you want to clean up? Maybe you want to merge some sites. And we'll get into some of the issues you need to think about, the cleanup issues you need to think about, that if you don't do them, it's going to be painful. Custom management tools. Do you have custom management tools that you've written? Will they work in an Active Directory Exchange 2000 environment, right? Sometimes customers just expect those to work because it's a Microsoft product and we should account for it. I think one of the things that's really helpful is to get quick wins as you start deploying. You know, get a server up, get OA out there so people start using it, get instant messaging up and running so people see the advantages of it. And then the other questions we have to decide, do I want to upgrade my existing servers or do I want to migrate to new hardware and new servers and move users? And we'll go over those decisions. And these are some of the issues we'll talk about in the next few slides. NetBIOS issues, trust to NT. One of the key things I want to point out there is Windows 2000 Server Pack 1 plus hotfixes. Exchange 2000, we all know, requires Windows 2000 SP1. In fact, there's a prereq check. You can't install Exchange 2000 on that box. What's important to understand, and it's not a requirement in that there's not a prereq check, but you should have Windows 2000 SP1 running on all your Exchange or Windows 2000 servers in your environment, particularly your DCs and GCs. We just see things go a lot smoother. If they're not out there, we're seeing issues with, you know, public folder access issues, messages getting lost in a black hole somewhere, mail delivery issues, and all of those are based on fixes we've made to the AD and to the GCs and DCs. Now, as we were going through this, we were deploying Exchange 2000 within Microsoft, and we were exposing a lot of Windows 2000 issues that we needed them to fix. The struggle is the Windows 2000 guys were on track to, we're going to ship SP1 now. And so we had to really struggle to get a lot of these fixes in. So that's why you see this plus hot fixes, because we even had issues that they had to fix that they couldn't put into SP1. So
You can cover those, Dave?
I won't go into detail about what every one of the fixes are. Those are documented in the Q articles that we publish. I'll publish the Q article, and I'll give you pointers to resources where you can get more information on that. But particularly, we see there's just particular changes, you know, improvements to the way the DC and GCs work, performance improvements, just things that we saw with ITG and those fixes are documented in the Q articles.
All those hotfixes skip the
Yeah. Okay. So you must make sure the DNS is configured and working correctly. We use DNS to do setup. We use DNS for everything, right? Now the question's asked, can we use Windows 2000 DNS or can we use another DNS? Well, we strongly recommend you use the Windows 2000 DNS. We have Lucent, go figure, right? They want to use their own DNS. Who'd have thought, right? Unix shop. But we told them, okay, if you want to do that, these are the things you need to consider. But I would push your customers strongly to use the Windows 2000 DNS. The Exchange server installation will fail, and a lot of the issues we see with setup failures are due to the fact that DNS is not configured properly. Exchange will expose your configuration errors. Exchange is a good AD netmon, so to speak, right? And DNS is the first thing, like I said, DNS is the first thing to check if setup fails. Now, we do have some NetBIOS dependencies as well. Setup does some NetBIOS checks. They look for servers through NetBIOS. Clustering also has some NetBIOS dependencies as well. So we still have a reliance on NetBIOS. Horse prep and domain prep, like I said, search for the schema using NetBIOS. Will? Is it only the setup process that uses NetBIOS? Primarily, there are some other, like I said, clustering uses NetBIOS as well when we do clustering setup as well. Yeah. Trust. Sure.
Why use
I'm sorry?
Like change using.
Why is Exchange using NetBIOS? Just work we couldn't get done in time. Yeah, there's plans to eventually not to need NetBIOS. It's just initial setup work that we couldn't get done in time in order to ship. So, and I know it's painful, but what's that? Does it imply that you need wins? Well, yeah. You would do well to have wins available, I think. Question there.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of reading from that. And based on that, what I look at is, do we need to still make sure that, like, an enterprise like customer still has a full global with infrastructure? Or is there a way we can have, a couple of win servers support immediately?
The question is, do customers need to have a fully enterprise-wide deployed WINS infrastructure? Not necessarily. You just need to be able to, ensure that you can do NetBIOS discovery, right? You're.
Well, what if it exactly need to resolve? We need to know what the win servers have.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
What is it exactly using wins for? What is it trying to resolve?
Well, it's to do the referral to the NetBIOS names, right? So.
We get these issues a couple of times. I can tell her.
Okay.
Expound
Sure.
a little bit on why
Sure.
it isn't necessary. The biggest thing was domain controllers and any Exchange server.
Right.
Had to be within that BIOS win. Domain controllers and any Exchange server. Okay, the workstations weren't in. And the primary reason there is that they're using setup APIs that were set on that BIOS.
Right.
So you can't get around that. And then clustering for failovers depends on that BIOS.
Okay, they expect all main controllers or main controllers that are part of that environment that
If you want Exchange in a domain,
Right.
its DCs need to be in the NetBIOS neighbor.
So where you're going to install Exchange needs to be able to do NetBIOS discovery. But it goes to his point, what he said. It's just legacy setup APIs that we had to use. We obviously have plans to make those changes eventually and do away with NetBIOS. Question back here and then here.
Just a real quick comment. A quick way if you don't want to mess with Win, you create an LMOS file, and then you run MTB stat.
Yeah.
Add some names in it.
Yeah, you can do that too.
You have to mess around.
You can do that too. Question down here.
Are the clients that have to resolve the names using Wix, or are the servers that must use it?
The question is, are the clients the one using the resolution? No, it's the servers. Yeah. It's primarily set up, and we see some issues with clustering as well. Question here and then here.
There are a huge number of reasons we still have to have Win. SQL Server admin still uses Win. All your down-level clients use Win to find stuff. We can't get rid of Win today.
Right.
It's just not there yet.
Okay, well, one more question and we'll move on.
The issue is that we can't get rid of the wins. What if the company doesn't have them?
Right.
Do I have to put anything in those? So all you have to do is put together a host file that has the servers that are necessary for the UC, the GC, your Exchange server. That's it.
Okay. Thanks, Will. So other issue is trust. If you have 5.5 servers still existing in a 4.0 domain, you're going to need trust for setup, for message routing, and for global administration. And we talk about SP1. We do a prereq check for SP1, so you can't get around not having SP1. But it's very important. We strongly recommend whatever word I can use that's the next step lower than require to get SP1 on your GCs and DCs as well. And SP1 plus that hotfix, which lists the post SP1 hotfixes we had to take, or Windows had to take for Exchange 2000. Schema extensions. This is always a fun topic for customers, right? We do schema extensions. We add to the schema. Forest Prep will add new objects in the AD, probably I think it's about over 1,000 objects it'll add. We make about 130 some partial attribute changes during our setup. And when we make these changes, they have to get replicated. So you'll see GC traffic, right? Replication traffic. So it's a fact of life. We need to tell customers we've documented very well in our LDF files what the schema changes are, but a lot of customers have a lot of angst over this. And again, I can point to customers like Intel that they want to know every bit, every schema change and why and what does that mean, and is it going to cause me pain? Why are you guys doing this? What does that mean for all this and that? I understand that, and I think we've done a good job of explaining what those are. To the extent that we can, make sure your customer is not afraid of schema changes. I know that they are, but if they can get over that angst sooner rather than later, it's going to make the deployment go a lot better. We do a very good job, and we can't promise that there won't be more schema changes on down the road. I mean, we're already considering a schema change for SP1 with respect to a notes connector. So those things, I know, ouch, I know customers don't like to hear that, but again, the ones that that stay up nights worrying about schema changes are the ones that aren't moving forward.
Has there been any work done on like maybe a special deployment scenario with the Windows 2000 AD team? Figure out, well, maybe we could just go into a lab, make the changes, and then force Bootstrap by sending these PCs out to these remote sites and get them to get the schema change correct, as opposed to having to go through the full rewrite process.
Yeah, that's a
Thought about that at all?
A couple of people have thought about that. We haven't really put a lot. It's kind of like you did in 5.5, right, where you pre-built a server and then shipped it out. So, right.
They're working on fixing that on the Whistler team. The schema change won't be when you update your entire GC, you just send the update.
Right.
Yeah, Will is right. I know Whistler is looking at doing deltas for schema changes as
Right,
well.
I'm just hoping to have Exchange 2000 deployed before with.
Well, then I think, as painful as it is, those schema changes, you're going to have to wait for those things to get replicated around. Question?
I don't think the schema change itself is due, that the exchange people can't make it. They have to submit it to
Right, exactly.
and then they have to wait for the AD team to test it, get around it,
Right.
and it delays all this.
Yeah, and it goes back to my earlier point. The more you can get all these teams, and work through a lot of those change control issues, the better life is going to be. For some customers, it's a fact of life, and you won't have it. When we went to the when we made the SP1 requirement, we had customers that said, and we wanted the customers to move forward on the next release, right? Because we wanted to keep the momentum up. We had customers that came back to us and said, it's going to take a week for us now to get the next release of Exchange 2000 deployed because I have to go through all kinds of change control to get an SP deployed. It would have been much better if we gave them all the hot fixes, because for a lot of customers, you can slipstream hot fixes better than you can an SP, right? Because you just say, hey, it's a necessary fact of life. I don't have this hot fixes, our server's going to crash. But they look at an SP and say, oh wow, well I got to do regression testing, and I got to do all this, and I got to change control. Will?
On the schema change issue, it's not just that I have to go to the exchange, I as the exchange administrator have to go to the active directory administrator and have to make changes. I also have to get the full admin rights to my exchange organization. And then I have to go either sit beside them, type in my service account password, or I have to do that to them too, which is a mess.
Right. Which brings us to the next question, or the next issue, which is permissions. Early on, a lot of our JDPs said, and early on in the product, we required basically God rights in order to install Exchange 2000. And our customers pushed back on us and said, look, that's not going to fly. I can't give my lowly Exchange admin superhuman rights to the AD, right? No way am I going to do that. So that's where a lot of this force prep and domain prep work came in, so we could allow customers to be more flexible in the permissions that are. And this is a complex subject. I mean, we could have a whole separate session on what permissions are required to do what. We put together a document that's up on the Eurodog server, a permissions doc, which really documents very well what permissions are needed to do what within Exchange, all the way from setup to doing user management. It's very well documented. I suggest going up and getting that doc and giving it to your customers. Yes. Oh, sure. Yeah, we will. Yeah, that's in the works. This is a draft right now, and we're close to getting it approved. And I'll get Laura to put it up on the EKM website.
I've already talked with Paul. Okay, great.
Question?
How do these documents say Microsoft Confidential before up to the customer?
I'm fine with it. You heard me. I didn't stutter. I'm fine with it. Yeah.
Take the label off of it.
I will. I will have Paul take the label off. At this point of the game, now that we've shipped, I'm fine with this because I would much rather see you have them more information than less, right? And if somebody pushes back, have them call me. I'll take the helmet for you guys. Okay, user domains. Your upgrade will go a lot smoother if your user domains have already been upgraded to the AD. Not a requirement. I'm just saying as a best practice, it will go a lot smoother. You can still have 4.0 users get access to your Exchange mailboxes. Just something you want to consider. One of the things is you don't have to worry about AD clean or anything like that. Universal groups. This is another topic that's probably worthy of a whole separate session. But Exchange 2000 does require universal groups. I know for some people, universal groups, they don't like to hear that. Customers don't like to hear universal groups. Universal groups are a bad thing for some customers. But if we look at 5.5 and the way we permission to public folders, we used 5.5 DLs to permission public folders because 5.5 had its own directory. Well, it's a different world in the Active Directory, right? Now we have groups, distribution groups and whatnot that handle some of the tasks of DLs, right? Well, in order to get the same model of using a DL to permission public folders, long story short, you need to use universal security groups and universal distribution groups to do that. And again, there's another document that talks about that in great detail, the Ultimate Guide to Groups. You can give this to your customers, yes. And that is, again, up on our websites. I suggest you read that. But the good thing is we built in work where you don't have to do a lot of pre-work. The ADC will recognize that you're bringing over an Exchange distribution list, and it will do the right thing and turn that into a universal distribution group. And they're dynamically converted after they came over to USGs. Now, we discovered this kind of early on in the process working with our JDP customers. A lot of the component owners within Exchange kind of knew that this was a lurking issue, but it was one of these things that we see in a development process where this component owner knows how this component works and what he needs to do, and this component owner knows how this component works and what he needs to do. But when you start plugging them together, then you see some of these things that you didn't account for. Well, fortunately, our team working with our JDPs, were able to kind of look at the big picture. So we knew there was a lot of work that had to be done not only by us, but by the Windows 2000 folks. So the Windows 2000 folks did a lot of work to allow us to do this dynamic conversion. And message routing requires membership to be in a GC. So the hard facts for USGs, we must use universal security groups if you want to have the same experience of using DLs to permission public folders, okay? Ramifications of attended, these are the ramifications if you try to get around that. Messages appear in a black hole. You won't even see your public folder hierarchy replicate. So again, the gory details are outlined in the groups document that talks about that. Yep.
With the, obviously the ramifications there as well as group limitations.
Right.
Have we considered like writing a utility that can be based off of an attribute to help you do nested grouping automatically? So I can set it to a list of users or point it to an OU, it'll look at a specific attribute and create a nested group structure based on that attribute type.
We haven't looked at it in the product group. I'm sure if you talk to G-Man, he'd be more than happy to do it. Yeah. The issue that you get in, the issue that you get in there is obviously support, right? I mean, all these ResKit tools that we write, they're really cool, but when it breaks, PSS throws up their hands and say, hey, you're on your own. So, a lot of things on the list to do, right? And those are things we could look at doing. And if you want to send me mail with detailed feedback, I'll see about what we can do, right? Okay? Domain models. So to accommodate universal security groups, you need at least one native mode domain in the forest to hold the group. That doesn't mean that you can't still exist in mixed mode. You just need to pick a domain in your org that's going to be this placeholder for these universal security groups. And it's kind of a group management domain, so to speak. And you just configure the ADC to replicate your DLs to that native mode domain. GC servers, this is another topic that I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer to it. It's one of these, it depends, one of these, how many clowns can you fit in the Volkswagen questions, well, how big are the clowns and how small is the Volkswagen? Planning for the number of GCs is a complex topic, like I said. We have a rule of thumb that we've done with testing and working with customers. You know, 1 GC for Exchange servers. ITG and their deployment, they looked at 1 GC per 1,000 users based on our profile, based on their profiling of our user community. I'm not necessarily saying that's going to apply to every customer. That's another model, another metric that they used. One of the key things is make sure there's enough bandwidth between the Exchange 2000 server and the GC, much like we had in 5.5 when you had this, when do I break another site and can I have Exchange servers in the same site across a slow link kind of a thing. It's much the same sort of thinking. So, and again, a lot of that depends on traffic, user profile, Exchange. And keep in mind, the Exchange server, it's not just your address lookups that you have to consider to a GC. Exchange is going to ping, the Exchange server itself is going to ping the GCs for information as well. So, but the GCs scale very well, and you can use the 2 gig memory switch if you have it. So, cleaning up Exchange 5.5. You may need to do some house cleaning on 5.5 before you start to migrate, or, right? One of the key things is we're much more stringent in naming conventions in Exchange 2000 than we were in 5.5. If you have display names that, you know, have ampersands or any, you know, non-DNS type of naming convention, you'll probably have to go in and change the display name. You won't have to change the actual directory name. You'll just have to change the display name before you start to migrate. We had Motorola run into this. We had Compaq run into this. And the solution is, once we explain to them, look, you just have to go in and change the display name. We'll be fine. DNS configuration, we keep talking about that. Move server wizard. Are you going to consolidate some sites before you bring your Exchange organization over? Locally scoped connectors. We don't know if we did some locally scoped connector configuration in 5.5. Those don't necessarily map cleanly over to Exchange 2000. Multi-mailbox mappings, which is a big issue as well. If I have one mailbox that's accessed by multiple users in 5.5, you need to account for that in the ADC, because if you don't clean that up, and we give you some tools, the multi-MB tool and the, what is the other one, the DNS, I forget, the DC, I forget what the name of the other one is. But there's 2 tools, and that's documented. I'll show you our website where you can get a lot of this documentation. But that mapping isn't clean either on the Windows 2000 side. Will? Yeah. Right, right. It's kind of related. Zombies is related, right? You have mailboxes that aren't associated with an NT account, right? And vice versa, right?
You've got a public folder.
Oh, those are that, right.
That have rights to
Right. Right, there's that too, right? You have public folders. You have public folders that are, you have some security issues with public folders that are associated with a user that no longer exists, or a mailbox that no longer exists. So migration methods. The easy method, like I alluded to, is I take my Exchange 2000 CD. Now that I've gotten all my Active Directory stuff figured out, right, I take my Exchange 2000 CD and I just want to upgrade that server. Well, it's probably a good practice for that not to be the first server that you do, because it won't do all the necessary discovery of the GCs, of the DCs when it goes and does that upgrade. You're much better to install a pristine 5.5 server and let it do the proper setup and discover all the DCs and the GCs in your Active Directory and lay down the organization first. But in-place upgrade works pretty well. I'll give you a couple of ugly things as we talk through this, or one ugly thing. Obviously, the computer's got to be running Windows 2000. Just a second, Dave. Fast database upgrade, it works pretty well. We went down to a Jetronics office in Tampa when we were down at TechEd, and they upgraded a 10 gigabyte Exchange 5.5 server that had a 10 gigabyte store, and it took about 45 minutes to do the upgrade. And it went pretty well. But here's the ugly thing. A bug we didn't fix, and we fought hard to fix it. But the status bar, as you do your upgrade, it'll go to about halfway, and then it'll stop. And it'll just sit there, and it'll sit there, and it'll sit there. And I was there with Paul Bowden, and Paul Bowden's going, oh, it's hung. We got to do something. It's not doing anything. I said, Paul, look, the exchange light is on. You know, the disk light is on. Things are happening. So sure enough, we got towards the end, and it went to 100%. Then it sat there, and it sat there, and it sat there, and it sat there. Oh, no, something's wrong. No, the exchange light's still flashing. Everything's fine. And it goes to 101%. And then it finishes. So that's a bug we didn't fix. GordM@Microsoft.com. Because he punted it. We fought for it. So the key thing to keep in mind, though, there is, you know, you will probably have users that'll say, think like we thought, oh, it's hung, I need to reboot. Well, you reboot, it'll pick up where it left off. I can't guarantee that it'll be pretty, but, and this is documented in the README because it's a setup issue. Thus, read the README. But one of the issues you might want to consider is if you're doing this over terminal server, you won't be able to see that exchange light going off, right? So just one ugly thing to keep in mind. Yep. Well, you could fire up perfmon too and see if you're getting disk activity as well, right? So what's that? There's not a specific process ID that I know of. There might be. I don't know specifically the answer to that. So again, it's not always the best option for the first server because of, you know, you're not guaranteed that that upgrade is going to discover all the objects it needs in the AD. And also, if you've done some specific IMS configuration on the 5.5 side, unfortunately, we don't forklift those configurations over. You're going to have to do the reconfiguration on your IMSs to have it do the same thing it was doing on the 5.5 side. So option number 2, install new servers. This is probably the most popular option with our Exchange JDP customers. I bring up a new server. I move my users over. Join an existing 5.5 site and move mailboxes. And it allows for hardware software refresh. And some of them looked at, for some customers, they had problems with doing the in-place upgrade. Early on, our in-place upgrade wasn't as clean as it is now, so they had a bad taste in their mouth, so they never went back to it. So, and there's also better contingency options. You know, you can back out easier that way. Option 3, which is hardly used by anybody, but it's something for, you know, you might want to consider. Just like in the AD world, our 5.5 organization is all screwed up. We just want to start all over, right? Just going to throw that thing away. Well, like I said, this is the most radical approach, rip and replace. You got to use tools like Xmerge to get them into a site. Why do this? Like I said, your current topology is a mess. You don't want to exist in mixed mode. Well, you want to take full advantage of the native mode, take full advantage of native mode Exchange 2000 or pure mode or whatever we call it. One thing to consider is you better be dang sure that there will never be another 5.5 server that shows up in your organization ever again, because that 5.5 server can't join that Exchange 2000 org if it's in pure mode. So my personal opinion is customers won't go to pure mode until the last 5.5 server is eradicated from the earth, because there's always an off chance they'll go buy some company that has 5.5. Now, maybe for smaller companies going to pure mode, you know, they can go a lot sooner. But for enterprise organizations, I think it's risky to make that decision. Yeah. Okay, we do have a 5.5 calendar connector for GroupWise. For notes, the calendar connector is due to ship in SP1. You can run the 5.5. The question was, what about the 5.5 calendar connector for GroupWise and notes? Like I said, we have one for GroupWise. For notes, it's due for SP1. Marketing is shipping 5.5 in the box with Exchange 2000. So for customers that have the hard requirement today for the calendar connector, they can run that calendar connector on the 5.5 on a 5.5 server. I know it's painful, right? Right. Right, right.
So they won't be able to run a turbo until.
Right, right, right. The question, if nobody heard that, he's got a company that has no 5.5 today, and that is painful for the pure notes customers. That, you know, Coca-Cola is one that's struggling. They want the calendar connector because they don't want to go through the trouble of installing the 5.5 server just to run the calendar connector. But we are working hard to try to get that in SP1. And it's one of those things that, you know, if we get it done sooner rather than later, we'll make it available outside of SP1 for those customers that absolutely need it. Will? Frost and SNADS connectors, there's really no plan to rev those, just from a business perspective. Yep. There's not enough compelling business reason to do that. I'll go over here and then back to you.
What's the estimated time for it?
What's the estimated time for SP1? This is too big of a crowd to give you a specific date. Probably first quarter of next year. But again, if they're specific, because obviously we're doing bug fixes, plus we're putting in much needed features like the calendar connector, like Mailbox Manager, which I didn't discuss in this session, but that's another stumbling block for a lot of customers. We will make that. In fact, we hope to have Mailbox Manager available very soon, before the end of the year. The issue is Mailbox Manager, we don't have a native Exchange 2000 Mailbox Manager like we do in 5.5. And that's just work we didn't get done. Yeah, back here. I believe so, but I'm not definitely sure on that. I'm sorry. I'll follow. Send me mail and I'll follow up and answer that for you. Okay. I'm not sure. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I'm not exactly sure what the story is for the group-wise connector. Okay. So connection agreements goes back to the ADC. Initially, we just had one connection agreement back in the RC1 and RC2 days. Now we've separated them out. There's recipient connection agreements, public folder connection agreements, and configuration connection agreements. So you need to understand, where will I need connection agreements? Should they be one-way or two-way? We recommend two-way. I understand ITG operated a long time. A lot of our customers operated a long time with one-way connections just because of the paranoia of potentially polluting the 5.5 side of things with whatever happened on the Active Directory side. We don't, as a product group, don't view that as a huge risk. We really didn't see anything compelling from either ITG or our customers that led us to believe that that was a risk. It was just, operating with a safety net. They felt a lot safer doing one way until they were sure everything was running. And then ITG just recently turned on two-way ADC. So a decision you should make. I'm just telling you, we don't know of any compelling reason why there is a huge risk for not running two-way. And then should deletes be on or off, that's another decision. We recommend that they be on just because it makes for a very consistent story, but I understand that some customers would like to have deletes be off, meaning I don't want the deletes that happen on the AD side get reflected on the 5.5 side. Will, you had a question?
If you have a customer who has second or third hand information about problems with two-way connection agreements, it's probably from during the beta time frame.
Right. 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 So, one of the last things, third-party software, and again, like I alluded to earlier, this was one of the things that, if you look at, we had kind of a hockey stick with our deployments. If you look at, a lot of it was our own problem, right? We gave our customers too many drops to try to get their arms around, and we were our own worst enemy in trying to get deployments out early. But when we finally finalized on what we knew was going to be the RTM bits, we saw our deployments really hockey stick up. The other thing that helped with the deployments was we had Trend Micro step up to give our customers beta versions of their antivirus software to run in production, and they supported them. That was the major stumbling block for getting these customers to go broadly with their Exchange 2000 deployment, no antivirus solution. Backup and restore and NetIQ management solutions, less of a blocking issue, but it is an issue. Most of our customers they subsisted with the NT backup and our Exchange backup. I heard that Backup Exec has just now got their Exchange 2000 version out there available in beta for some select customers. This is a big issue, right? We struggle with this all the time with software releases. Our ISVs are always, 30 to 60 or 60 to 90 to 120 days behind when we release. And I think it's going to be an issue with a lot of, it's going to delay some of our deployments until the third-party tools are out there. The only thing we can do is we as a company and your customers put pressure on those vendors. We're working as quickly as we can with them. We have specific people in the product group, the admin folks, give NetIQ the drops that they need when they need them. Parul Marek, who does our AV antivirus stuff, she worked with Sabari and Trend Micro, and I know Sabari also has a version out now that runs on Exchange 2000. Supposedly we'll also scan the STM as well. You can talk to me offline about what I think about Sabari, but I know customers like it. But the point is, third-party vendors are out there and they are stepping up. Dave?
When you said scan the STM, you mean directly?
Yeah. The question, when I mean scan the STM, do I mean directly? And I said yes. There is a version of LoadSim for Exchange 2000, and you could probably, I'll show you the resources, and you could get through it through the X website. Well, I'm not sure what you mean by enhanced. There's not a lot of new features. It works on Exchange 2000 server. The logic is still the same as far as setting up profiles and whatnot. It'll do more internet type mode, and it'll do some OS stuff as well. So some other tools that were custom made. Prospector is a really good tool that ITG wrote that's going to show up in the res kit, which allows you to do basically health status of your Exchange environment. I have a funny story to tell. Is Bob Davis, who was the ITG project manager, and myself were meeting with Cisco talking about Exchange 2000 deployment, and Bob was going over the ITG deployment, and he wanted to show him some tools, and he showed him Prospector, and the day we were doing that was not a really good day in ITG. So he showed Prospector, and all the servers were showing red, and the Cisco guys were going, why is all that stuff red? And Bob danced really fast. Oh, it's just going against our lab. Our guys are still testing this. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. But the point is, it was a really good, it is a tool that allows your customers to check the health of your Exchange deployment. And then the WebMonQ monitor, written by Barry Steinglass in the admin group, just gives you a web view of your Exchange queues to see how they're building up, and you can set flags to say, have it go green or red or yellow based on the queues. So those things are going to show up in the res kit. Yes, we're shipping AutoDL as well. The question was, are we shipping AutoDL in the res kit? The answer is yes. And these other tools you should get to know, LDP, ADSI Edit, and WinRoot, particularly LDP and ADSI Edit to check the health and status and configuration of your AD. And read these resources, the Exchange 2000 and 6 Steps Guide. Probably kind of, for those of us who have been working with Exchange 2000 for a while, kind of, well-known information. But for your customers that are new, it's a good. It looks really cool, right? Wow, just 6 steps. But it's a 60-page document, so 10 pages per step, right? In just a second, I'll show you. The distributed system guide is good to read. The quick tuning guide that Paul put together is really good to read, and the permissions papers. So here's a list of resources. Eurodog Quick Docs, which has a lot of these docs that I talked about. The E2K JDP website, let me show you that real quick. This has just about, a lot of documentation here. Some of it's just relevant to the beta, like upgrading from 4471, upgrading to RC2, but there's a lot of other stuff out there. E2K JDP 02. And then the other thing, and Will can attest to this too, this showcase CD that we put together for our JDP customers. You'll see over here it has tools, has diagnostics. No, this was purely given out to our JDP customers, and I would not burn this CD for your customers. The reason I say that because there's a lot of tools on there that were just relevant for things that happened during the beta. So you would end up, giving somebody a gun without a trigger lock if you gave those tools out to your customers. So, but a lot of good content in there to familiarize yourself with deployment issues. Okay? We got done a bit early. Any other questions or comments out here?
Any other books coming into our slide? Microsoft Press books?
Yeah, there's an app development book that just came out, and I know Will is on this Exchange Content Task Force. Will, how's that going with the